Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Another entry for you here based on your suggestions. This one by far remains one of the most interesting ones I have ever come across. I still don't know if I should even classify it as a cryptid because it seems so much of an original thing. I mean, I don't know if it's a cryptid, if it's any kind of monster, if it's a spirit, if it's a ghost, if it's an urban legend, who knows? But this particular thing, whatever it is, a lot of people are able to conjure it on its own and personalize it to their own satisfaction, like to their own way that they want to personalize it. And I still don't know how to classify this. Just for the sake of this video, though, I'm gonna go ahead and I guess categorize it as a form of a cryptid because it instantly reminded me of one of my favorites, which is the genius Loki, which was something that you could not see, you could not hear, you could not smell, you could not touch, all the senses basically, and yet it's still there. And in this case, very, very similar. I'm talking about something that's called the tulpa. I've never heard of this thing again, but apparently there is a whole world of this out there. People that have worked hard on doing these things to create their own tulpas, people that have had great success, others that have had apparently some kind of horror stories tied to their creations. But again, I still don't know how to categorize it. And what I'll do is I'll give, I guess, as much information as I can. I'll even include a link for apparently it's like an article of some sort that goes into some deep discussions about what a tulpa is and how to create one. In hindsight, though, I don't know about this stuff. I don't really recommend it. This stuff seems a little bit, I don't know. I think a lot of things can go wrong with something like this. So I don't know if the people that actually do these things and that are successful, if it's all in their head or if it's something else entirely. But that being said, I would err on the side of caution with regards to anything like this, only because, again, so many things can go wrong. But first, let's talk about what is a tulpa. That's the hard part. In essence, the simplest way to describe it is it's an imaginary friend. Basically, it's something that people create where it's an adult version of their imaginary friend. In other words, kind of like we all when we were kids, and there was the idea that kids were able to talk to someone that only they saw or they heard as kids, but later on in life, obviously, they dropped it. Well, here, as adults, people are doing the same thing. Crazy stuff. I had no idea that there was this thing existing in this world today. There are websites dedicated to this. There's like a Reddit site. Even the New York Times talked about this. There's a great article in Vice as well that talked about this as well. So, again, this is a whole other world that seems to exist on these imaginary friends. And because it's so hard to grasp like what they are because they're so personalized. Basically, it's whatever people want their imaginary friend to be, but it exists in their head only. So in other words, if you are with someone who says they have a tulpa with them, you can't see their tulpa, you can't hear them, you can't touch them, but in that person's mind, they can. And I still don't know, though. Someone has to tell me in the comments, those that apparently have created their own tulpas, how do they, I guess, work with the tulpas? I mean, do they see them in person? Like, is it something standing right in front of them? Or do they, the most common thing is apparently that they hear their tulpas, but is it like a real auditory sound? Or is it something where it's just inside their head? Because obviously, just throwing something out, like you can hear a fire siren in your head right now. Make one up in your head right now, but nobody else will hear it. So if you're imagining that fire, that sound in your head, then is it the same thing like when people that are successfully creating these tulpas, where it's almost as if it's real? Like that's the thing I can't grasp. I don't know if I'm reading this wrong. but that's the one I'm looking for. I'm trying to find like a straight answer. The people that work with these tulpas that created them, is it pretty much as real as if these things were right in front of them? In other words, they can see them, they can hear them, they can smell them, in some cases even touch them. That's the thing that I don't have a direct answer to. But yeah, that's all it is. In essence, it's an imaginary friend that people willingly create. And here's the kicker. Once they create this imaginary friend, then it in turn becomes independent. Like it actually is a real thing. It has its own mind, it has its own thoughts. There's no control over it once it's created, and it apparently stays with the person for life. So the idea is the people that create these things, these tulpas, they do this, and then in turn they create their own sentient life that stays with that person for the rest of their life. The people, by the way, that create these, they're called tulpamancers, and all they do is once they create these things, they do them because the most common reason is companionship. So as far as like where the idea of tulpas first came from, apparently they've been around for a long, long time, hundreds and hundreds of years. We're talking back into like the ancient days involving Buddhists and also monks. These monks and Buddhists, they would apparently create their own form of a tulpa as a way of like projecting something to guide them, like something that would able to help them when it came to their life, their very strict life guidelines. I mean, these were people that obviously followed a very strict set of rules in life, and so the way that they would navigate through this is they created their own people, I guess you could call them, that would manifest, and at least in their heads, I don't know if it was actually real or some sort, but they would do so to help create that discipline and that wisdom they needed in order to continue the life that they wanted. And in turn, this, I guess, lasted all these years up until now, where some people, especially those that have Western philosophies, where they in turn wanted to create their own imaginary friends again. They relished having that, I guess, as children, and then they in turn wanted to have that again as an adult. And the way they do it is they follow a very strict guideline in order to create these things, and once done so, then they have somebody as a lifelong companion. There's a known case, Belgian French explorer by the name of Alexandra David Neal. She was one that chronicled these practices, and she wrote about it and she researched it, and she was able to actually create a tulpa in her own mind. She said this was her experience. He said, once a tulpa is endowed with enough vitality to be capable of playing the part of a real being, it tends to free itself from its maker's control. This, say Tibetan occultists, happens nearly mechanically, just as the child, when his body is completed and able to live apart, leaves its mother's womb. That's a great analogy, by the way, because in essence, that's what it seems like it is. It's like having a baby inside your body who is completely not independent while it's within the body, but then there becomes that point when it births itself and then it lives its life on its own, yet it's still attached in some way to the mother throughout its entire life. Crazy stuff. This lady, Alexandra, she said she was able to create her own tulpa, which was in the image of a friar-like or friar tuck-like monk, and this little monk developed a life of its own, but later had to be destroyed, which I'll talk about some of the bad experience here in a minute. Now, how, and I keep saying that these things are personalized, is because they are. People create tulpas to their own liking. There are people that apparently create tulpas to look like a fox, like an anthropomorphic fox, like a human-like fox. Others that create a pony. Others that create just regular-looking people. Others that fashion them apparently after anime characters. The whole idea is every single one of these tulpas are individual. They, in turn, take a little while to be created, and then once they do, they're with that person. Here's the process and how it works, apparently. Whenever someone has decided that they're going to go ahead and create a tulpa, apparently it takes a lot of concentration. We're talking if not weeks, months of concentration, and it's you visualizing your companion. The more you visualize, the more concrete that visualization becomes. It's the way I read it is it's like staring at a drawing and then being able to slowly but surely, the more you stare at it, recall what it looks like afterward, after you take your eyes away from that drawing. That's in essence what that is. You start visualizing like the face, you start visualizing the eyes, how you want the eyes to look, you start visualizing like the neck, the rest of the body, you start visualizing how that thing will sound, you'll start visualizing how it'll act, how it'll move, how it'll respond to things, how it'll talk, how it'll be independent on its own. And then there's that one point where it just snaps, and then that's when it's actually there. And when that happens, that's when it catches apparently some people by surprise, because they work so hard at it. They're able to visualize all these things, create this thing, and then bam, it's there, it's alive, and it responds back to the person. Again, I don't know if it's a real voice or if it's something else where it's just 100% imagined inside the person's head. But when that happens, then they're able to work with the tulpa, and vice versa. The tulpa is in turn able to, I guess, interact with the person. Here's how one person described it in the New York Times. This guy, a young man named Jack, was interviewed by the author who was chronicling information on these tulpas, and he said, Jack told him, he said he decided to make a tulpa back when he was in college, and how he did it was he set aside an hour and a half each day for this. I don't know how long he did it initially, but it took him upwards of 4 weeks. Again, an hour and a half each day doing this, and he would spend the first 40 minutes or so dedicated solely to relaxing and clearing his mind. He wanted to have nothing distracting him from what he was trying to do. Once he felt like he was at a point where everything was cleared, then he started to visualize a fox, because this guy Jack, that's what he likes. He liked foxes. He wanted his tulpa to be a fox-like creature. And then finally, after about 4 weeks of doing this, that's when he said he started to feel a presence, and it seemed like it was actually a fox's presence. How the presence of a fox is as compared to like something else different, like a chicken or a dog, I don't know, but that's how he said that he was able to feel the fox's presence. And then that moment that came, that bam moment where thing just snapped, was after a chemistry exam. I guess he was coming home from the exam, and then all of a sudden he heard, and again, I don't know if he hears this outside, like in the real world, or if it's in his head, but he heard clear as day, "Well, how did you do?" And bewildered, this guy Jack was wondering, like, who said that? Where's that coming from? And then that's when he realized that that was it. He created his tulpa. His tulpa was responding to him about his chemistry exam, and that's when he asked, "Well, how did you do?" And then he realized that that was him. That was the tulpa. And he created him, and they, I guess, interacted with each other. The key thing, though, is apparently with a tulpa, it stays with you forever, but it can in some ways be pushed away if you stop concentrating on it thereafter. It exists only as long as you, I guess, want it to exist in your area, because every now and then, if you stop meditating on it, or if you stop, I guess, thinking about it, and let's say you're concentrating on other things, maybe you have your own family later on, or you have a lot of other things happening in your life, then the tulpa in turn will start I guess disappearing and not interacting as much, until in some cases it's gone, but not completely gone, because there are reports apparently of tulpas every now and then unexpectedly coming back. I guess just either knocking on the person's mind or doing something altogether to try to make sure if the person remembers them. Now, as far as the horror stories about the tulpas, here's what happens, and this is why I caution, I hesitate when it comes to doing anything like this, because the idea of a tulpa also is it lives with you, it lives in you, and in some cases people allow it to control that person. I don't know why, but apparently some people do that. Now, what is the natural inclination whenever you have something like that that allows that you allow to control over you, you lose control yourself. And there are horror stories about people apparently not being able to control themselves, to control their mind, to control their body. That sounds like, in some cases, like schizophrenia. I mean, that sounds like the worst case possible, where you truly are imagining things, you're hearing things, you're being influenced, you have these things, whatever they are telling you to do things, maybe bad things, and then that's when it's really, really bad stuff. So that's why, again, I don't know. All of this, it seems like it's fun in some cases. I mean, imagine having your own imaginary friend that you've always wanted, and that it's something involving something that you could create 100% for yourself. Like, let's say your favorite character is Superman. Create a Tulpas Superman. How crazy, awesome would that be? But at the same time, the idea that you could do this, and apparently it works, and this thing is independent, and it can, in some cases, possess people if you let it. I don't know. That's where it gets pretty bad with that regard. I don't like that. I'm not going to do anything like this. I don't recommend it. So, but if again, there's a whole world for this. If people are interested. I don't know. So, all the information that I'll provide is a link below that goes again into a whole other detail. It's called Kia Haddad's Absolute Guide to Tulpas. I haven't read it. I just skimmed like the first couple of pages, but it goes into a complete detail about tulpas, creating them, what not to do, other information like that. And if you wanted to take a gander, by all means do so. Tulpas can apparently, though, be very helpful in some cases, because they help people with their memory. They help people with being able to, I guess, assist them throughout the day if they're sad, if they need something to be like a pick-me-up of some sort. It's a lifelong companion again. So it's the idea that these things are there to be with you, and because you created them, they're there to help. So fascinating stuff. Never heard of this thing again. Tulpas, whatever they are. I still can't tell what to categorize them as. Again, it just reminded me so much of a Genius Loki that's why I included it with the Cryptids and Monsters series. Does anyone know any more information? I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't even touched on when it comes to this world. So if anyone has anything else that stands out, please post the information below. It'd be interesting to hear if anyone has, I guess, created the tulpa, to at least let people know like what that's like. I mean, if it's, again, something that's sensory oriented, or if it's just really just in the person's head. It'd be fascinating to hear that information. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.
Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters update video. Well, you know how much I love doing these update videos because they're so rare to do. It absolutely has to be something so perfect when it comes to either a news article or something else that I spot online, that I realize what a great way to do a follow-up to a video that I talked about who knows how far back when. It absolutely just has to be perfect. The situations have to be perfect. Otherwise, I just leave it be. But such was the case with a post that I made just the other day involving an imaginary friend, if you will. And then I thought to myself, is this a tulpa? Is this actually something that was photographic proof of a tulpa? And so it got me thinking, and as far as the views and then as far as the comments, a lot of people liked it. Got me thinking, let's go ahead and let's do an update to the tulpa video that I did around 5+ years ago, and then that way we get to show that information here. So quite exciting when I come across stuff like this that I can do these follow-up videos on. So let's go ahead and let's focus on that. First, I'm just going to briefly talk about tulpas again, but in this case with the update, it's involving potential photographic proof associated with them. Great stuff. Now, as far as tulpas, if you wanted to check out my entire video on it, I'll include the link for it below. I'm also going to include some great links that I found online, not just through Reddit, but some other links that showcase so much stuff involving this world. I mean, I mean, I'm just barely scratching the surface of anything towards tulpas. I mean, there's an entire culture, if you could call it that, linked to it. I think they have a specific name too, like they're called tulpamancers, which are people that are absolutely just devoted to this type of world. I still think it's a little dangerous doing something like this, mainly because of the implications involved. So I have my reservations. I did back then with my original video, and I still do now. But as always, you can make your own choice and then look at the information, including in the links. And then if you wanted to do something like this, absolutely you could do so. And apparently it has its positive qualities, and again it has its negative qualities. We'll just talk about that more here in just one moment. But first, just a brief bit of information again on what is a tulpa. So a tulpa is apparently, for lack of a better term, an imaginary friend. You know how we all apparently had those way back when we were kids. Some did, some didn't. But either way, though, this is to an extreme. Like, instead of just having something that you think it's there, apparently something is truly there. That's what a tulpa is. It's the name given to someone or something that is conjured up by an individual. And it's pretty much just tied to that individual and their preference. So it could be anything the person wants. It could be, like I've seen several examples, people that look like anthropomorphic wolves or foxes, or in other cases, people that look like more real people, or in other cases, even to the extreme, just weird looking, bizarre beings altogether. And the thing is this, these tulpas have their own mind, they have their own consciousness, they even form their own opinions, they talk to people, they create conversations. They are pretty much there as a companion 24/7 when it comes to whoever created them. And that's where some of the positive qualities come to mind, because apparently having a tulpa and some of the benefits involved is increased happiness, more confidence, it lessens anxiety, especially people that have this fear of, let's say, talking to others or in group settings. Well, if you have a tulpa around and they're able to help with that scenario, then at least that's one of the other benefits as well. And then also apparently there's memory when it comes to these tulpas, like they can help you remember things that you might have forgotten. And in other cases, they apparently control part of your emotions as well, because they're there, of course, to help and to associate companionship to you. And then on the more extreme end, like if you have severe like ADHD or depression, then they're there as well to 100% help you out. So again, lots and lots of benefits, at least towards the people that have been able to create these tulpas and use them on a continuous basis. I still kind of scratch my head at that world, because according to what I've read online and from others, tulpas can be unreal and then they can be real at the same time, if it makes sense. Like one article I was reading just stated this, like imagine a wooden chair in front of you. Like it's not there, but just imagine it in your head. If you can do that, then that's essentially what a tulpa is. You can kind of see, almost feel that wooden chair in front of you because you're imagining it and you're the only one doing so, but others won't. But in the other cases, stuff involving tulpas, they can be 100% real. Like they can actually pop up in front of people and then other people can see them, and then that's when it goes to a whole other world associated with that. But for the most part, it tends to be that it's just imaginary. That includes also the conversations that people have, which I was reading on some articles. It kind of freaked out some parents, because here's someone that's having just complete back and forth conversations with someone that parents can't see, hear, or anything like that. And then they're thinking, what is going on? That leads to another discussion as well, with people thinking that creating tulpas is association of schizophrenia or hallucinations in some cases as well. I don't know. That's again a whole other part that has very, very strong opinions. But for lack of a better term, at least with tulpas, their imaginary friend status, the tulpamancers absolutely believe that no, it's none of that. It is 100% real, at least in their head, and it's 100% real to them, and it's a real entity. It just happens to be exclusive to the person that's listening or seeing them, and so on. So lots and lots of discussions still left on the tulpa side. And again, check out the link that I originally had from 5 years ago, and then that way you'll be able to see. On the bad side, though, involving tulpas, there's this. It's about control. So tulpas have their own thought form and their own opinions, but apparently some of them like to have a little bit more. Like depending on people's preferences, they can have their tulpas temporarily take over things for them. Like they can take over, I saw in one diagram, people's arms. And then that way the tulpa can do something that the person wouldn't normally do, like draw or do music, something like that. Or in other cases, they can take over people's thought processes, maybe when it comes to exams, stuff like that. Being able to just use the tulpa to their advantage, but that still involves loosening a little bit of your control. On the far end, though, that's where the bad stuff happens, because I was reading some of this stuff. I wish I could find the pictures, again, the drawings, but I can't find them anymore. These are 5+ years old. But the ones that I saw showcase someone that lost complete control of their tulpa. In other words, this tulpa was free reign, and they were also trying to take over the person that created them. And the person that did this created these drawings of the tulpa. Like, this is what this person visually saw, and on a daily basis. And it showed this tulpa like this mass of just evil energy, like a swirl of energy with just evil looking eyes and sharp teeth looking back at them. And it was almost in like a screaming fashion. And there it was, apparently every single day to this person, because they lost control and they're not able to do anything about it. Scary world when it comes to that part, because you can help create these tulpas, but once you do so, it's like adopting a pet. It's like adopting something else that like a cat or dog, because you have a new life in front of you. And for better or worse, if conditions go bad, then you have to make sure that you do something about it, like in terms of taking care of it or controlling it as much as you can. But that's on the extreme end associated with the tulpas. That all leads to this, what I had just posted the other day. So check this out. This is pretty freaky, pretty scary stuff, and I don't know, it's a little unsettling too, but here's how it goes. At an unknown location, in terms of a McDonald's, who knows where this was at, there was a mom who was taking a picture of her daughter, and she was there playing on the playground set. And as you can see from the caption, she said, "Taken at a McDonald's, we thought our daughter was alone in this playground at the time. The face on the left was not visible at the time I took this." And when she asked who was next to her in the pic, she replied, "That's my imaginary friend, Beto." So that is pretty freaky. You can see a close-up of the face. You can see the details associated with it. Obviously, the daughter's face is hidden for privacy purposes by the mom when she took the picture, but at least you can clearly make out that freaky looking face associated with whoever that imaginary friend was. And when I saw those words, those magic words, imaginary friend, that instantly made me think of a tulpa. And I thought, could this be actual photographic proof? It ties into what I was mentioning a couple of minutes back with regards to people apparently having such a strong connection to their tulpa that it becomes real, like real, like people can actually see them. And this was the case apparently here. Maybe it wasn't seen in person, but it was seen in an afterthought, like in this case involving a photograph. Same thing happens whenever you're doing like ghost hunts. You don't see things on the film up front, like in front of you, but when you review afterward, that's when they start appearing. That's when it showcases there. And look at the evidence too. Like you can see on the bottom of that tube that the girl is in, how her body essentially creates that shadow on that bottom yellow part. But where's the shadow? Where's the imprint associated with whoever that freaky looking guy is right next to her? It's not there. It's nowhere near there. It seems like it's actually just hidden, or if it is, it's nothing there creating that kind of weight or that kind of impression on that yellow tube part. And so that kind of adds more credence that this is something freaky, that this was something else that was truly captured that wasn't there, but it showed up sure enough later on the film itself. Could it be something else altogether? Could it be actually something like a spirit or a ghost or something else like that? Sure, there's always that possibility. This could also be a fake. Some people were stating on the comments that they thought it looked kind of fake. There's always that possibility too, but I don't know, somebody would have to go through a lot of trouble to do something like this to make it look as good as this too, just for it to be a fake altogether. But what do you guys think? Is this a photographic proof of a tulpa? Because again, I associate imaginary friends with tulpas. That's to me that link. But let me know in the comments if you think that is also photographic proof of a tulpa, or if it could be something else. And if anyone knows more information about this photo as well, like in terms of where this was taken and so on, like what happened to that imaginary friend, anything like that, then please post those comments as well below too. One last thing I wanted to mention too, you and I actually may have already had a good dealing with tulpas, at least on the film world, or at least on the entertainment world. For example, there's this Fight Club, which is obviously like a very, very popular movie. The characters there involving Edward Norton and Brad Pitt's character, could actually be Tulpa, in this case Tyler Durden, because Edward Norton's character, who I can't recall if he has like a full name, I think it was like Jack, but even then that was disputed. Either way, Jack could have created this actual being, in this case Tyler Durden, in his mind, and then of course it became 100% real afterward. So that was pretty neat to think about that implication. And then another example is Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes being one of the most famous comic strips ever on the newspaper side, or at least when newspapers were still pretty popular. And of course there's Calvin being the real boy, and then there's Hobbes, his imaginary friend, who's 100% real to him. So much real, in fact, that they have all those daily conversations and those fights, and then the playing on the playgrounds and so forth. So there's that too. And then on another recent example, one movie I was watching recently, it got me thinking about tulpas, was Predators, the sequel, the one involving Adrian Brody and others. There's a character there from Lawrence Fishburne named Roland Noland, and there's very notable parts there where he's talking to someone real as day, 100% to him, but obviously nobody else can see whoever that person is. And they go a little bit back and forth too throughout various parts of the scenes. Like there he is arguing with his imaginary friend, so maybe he inadvertently created a tulpa in his mind as well, and of course he can only see it. But again, fascinating world when it comes to this stuff, this world of tulpas, tulpamancers, summoning them, creating them, trying to control them having to control you. It's stuff that, again, I'm not going to touch on my end, but I just present the information here, and then that way, if anyone wants to do so and be into that type of world, then it's obviously out there to look at. But let me know what everyone thinks about that world as far as tulpas, what your experience is, if you dabble in it, if you have any tulpas that you in turn manage, post them in those comments. That's great stuff to share with everyone here. And then also, again, please share as well your opinions on that photograph. I think it's as close as can be to a real tulpa if the photograph is 100% real. But yes, I would love to hear what your comments are there too. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.
Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. Well, I wanted to share this one here for several reasons. For one, it's linked to one of my favorite cryptids of all time. At least I think it's linked to it, and I'll give more reasons on it here in just a moment. Number two, also, it's a pretty scary experience. This is something that apparently is a cryptid run amok, something that has been almost released and is terrorizing this poor user afterward. And number three, mainly because it's a good read. It's definitely one of the richer stories that I have seen here. As always, these are just maybe with a little grain of salt. We don't know 100% how true or untrue these particular encounters are. I still err on the side that people are just presenting it as facts, but that's always, it's up to you to decide. But it comes from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit called Paranormal, although again, the reason why I listed it here on the Cryptids and Monsters side is because I think it's linked more to the tulpa. The user has actually been redacted. It's anonymous, so I don't know who to give credit to, but they titled it as Muppet Clown Entity Bullied Me as a Child. Interesting title, no? So let's go ahead and let's shed this particular encounter, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterward. So here's what they say. I have had a plethora of strange experiences in my life. In this instance, I will start with the earliest one that I can remember. I had an active imagination as a kid. I had imaginary friends that I would talk to, even when I was around actual people. I can account for all of these imaginary friends as normal. I mean, they were either characters from TV shows or cartoons that I would watch, so I consider them normal, all except one. This is what I remember. I was very young and had been sick with a fever and cold. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I was young enough that I was wearing a pajamas, and it was with built-in socks at the feet. And so I was being carried upstairs by my aunt and was telling her to hurry up
or the Cookie Monster thing will get us. This Cookie Monster is a real character from a kids show, but it was not the real Cookie Monster that I was afraid of. I called it a Cookie Monster because this thing I would see had very similar eyes to the actual Cookie Monster. It was the only way I could describe it with my limited vocabulary at the time. And so it looked like a long hand puppet with white shirt that would billow and ripple because it had no torso. It could stretch and grow to different lengths. Its arms were like metal rods that could extend out quickly and strike me in a way similar to a snake bite. And it would always slap me open palmed or with two fingers, an index and a pointer. The hands had on white gloves just like Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse, and the head was perfectly rounded, just like a beach ball. It had curly hair that would change color from orange to blue. Its face was painted white, and it had a mouth which would twist and contort in very terrifying ways as it would hit me. The eyes bulged out of the head and moved on their own, just like the googly eyes on kids' toys or puppets. I will try to include a photo of the actual Cookie Monster from TV, and I will also attempt to draw a sketch of how I remember this creature looking. And so I remember my aunt giggled because she thought I was being cute, but this thing was actually very terrifying to me. And then it struck. It would always pop out of the walls from the cracks of the trim or the drywall, and it would always poke me very, very hard. So hard that it would cause a massive and sudden twitch or spasm from me that would make my whole body jerk suddenly. And it would always leave me sore where it hit me, and often with cramped muscles. I would cry and complain about this thing hitting me, but as you would guess, this would only get me scolded for making up fibs, and so I stopped talking about it altogether. I do have one very distinct memory of lying on my bed and then having this thing pop up from in between the bed and the wall. It would kind of slither upwards. It cocked back and then it swung at me, not with a closed fist, but with those two fingers, and then it struck me harder than ever before, right in the armpit. My aunt happened to be about 20 feet away at the time. She was blow drying her hair before school. She screamed in horror and ran out of the room. I remember her telling my grandparents and my mom that I should be seen by a doctor because, and I quote, "He literally flew out of that bed like something pushed him." I remember her words exactly. I was never taken to a doctor, and the incident was never discussed again. And so I got a bit older, and eventually the thing stopped popping out of the walls and hitting me. But I did have a recurring dream for many years in which I would try to escape from this creature. It would always take place in the same second-story building, and it would always end the same way. I would figure a way out of the room window and end up on the lawn below. And when I would stare up at the window, this creature would stare back down in a calm, confident manner. Not angry that I had escaped, but confident that this chase would happen again, and it would definitely get me next time. After about the first year of high school, the dream stopped. I have not seen this Muppet clown since, nor do I care to. I realized this Muppet clown was probably just a manifestation of some fear or trauma that I had experienced but could not process as a child, but I have to wonder, what if this is something more sinister? I'm a terrible artist and hadn't done a full sketch, but this does the face some justice, although not exact. And then that's it. That's everything that this user mentioned in their very terrifying story. In fact, you're looking right now at the exact picture that this person is referring to. It's not a picture like they took of this quote-unquote Muppet clown, but instead it's the closest representation of it. Scary stuff, right? Those of you that are afraid of clowns already, I forget what the term is for it, but imagine seeing this on a nightly basis and it's causing you this much havoc. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all those experiences, in fact, and again, link it to one of my favorite cryptids, the tulpa. If you haven't seen my video on it, I'll include the link for it below. I'll also include the link for that news article that I did as a follow-up of sorts. The tulpa is one of my favorites because it's a manifestation that comes to life based on imagination. Like, people almost will it into existence. There's apparently guidelines that are out there to this day on how to create your own tulpa. It's the idea that you too could have your very own real imaginary friends. In other words, they're imaginary. They don't exist anywhere else, but you see them, and they see you, and they talk with you, and they're actually real. They're really, really real. You're talking to them and encountering them just as if you would if a real person were there. But again, nobody else around you can see this particular being. The problem, though, is this. These imaginary friends, these tulpas, live their own life. They don't follow any guideline. They don't follow, like, let's say, rules or commands. Once you will them into existence, they're their own specific being. And in most cases, they're okay. They're good. People enjoy having them around. They become best friends with the users. But in other cases, rarer ones, those that take a more sinister side, their particular traits become almost uncontrollable. In some cases, almost downright evil, the sense that they can harm the user as well. That becomes a possibility too. That's what I think happened in this case. The clues are at the very beginning with this user stating that I had an active imagination as a kid and I had imaginary friends that I would talk to. What is that? That's a tulpa right there. I think that this person, especially when they stated that they could account for all of these imaginary friends as being normal, they were creating these tulpas for so long, even inadvertently as a kid, and not realizing it. That's what I think happened here. They created by accident this tulpa. It became real. Maybe it was friendly at first, but maybe it took on another form, or maybe it was outright evil all from the beginning, but then it started terrorizing this poor user. I can't recall, though. Someone might have to let me know if tulpas can cause real physical harm, like, in other words, pick up something and throw it at you type stuff, or again, if it's just more as it entails here with this story of a user kind of creating it themselves, like if a tulpa strikes, as this user stated, where they in turn act as if they were hit. Obviously, it feels very real to them, but again, I'm wondering like what the physical effects are to it. Definitely seems real enough, at least for somebody, as the grandma stated, or the aunt, I'm sorry, to be pushed backwards, to have seen this user pushed backwards immediately. Definitely seems real enough on that end, no. But again, I think that's what this is. This is a tulpa that this user accidentally created, and then it started just staying on its own, and then it was almost there afterward and then disappearing as an afterthought, because apparently that's what happens to tulpas. If you don't pay attention to them too much, they start just moving out, moving elsewhere, and who knows what happened to them afterwards. Like what happens to a dream, right? It seems very real whenever you're experiencing it, but afterward, what happens to that dream? So in other words, that's at least everything that I wanted to present here, and again, why I definitely wanted to share this particular encounter here. Definitely a throwback to one of my favorite cryptids. But let me know, am I correct on this? Can y'all think of anything else? Anything else that stands out as another cryptid that is linked to this? Love to hear what your comments are. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye. Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. I thought I would mix in this one here while I'm continuing to do your mysteries and oddity suggestions, mainly because it's a horror story associated with a bad tulpa. Those of you that follow my channel for years know that tulpas are one of the most fascinating subjects that I love talking about. I've done several videos on them. I've also done several news videos as well. And I thought to myself, why not help focus more on the encounter side too? Well, this one comes from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit called Tulpas. It's from a user called Comfort Account. And in it, they state that this is a tulpa that is trying to actively kill them. How scary is that? In fact, I was listening to a podcast also earlier today that was featuring stuff about tulpas, and it reminded me of a story that was there too. I might talk about that one in another video. But let's go ahead and let's focus on what this user has to state, and then I'll get my own thoughts on opinions on it afterward. So here's what they stated. Okay, so what happened was that I was in a particularly bad place in my life as I had lost my long-term job and my girlfriend, and then I started to talk to myself around that time as I suspected I had a hidden system to which I was wrong. I ended up giving control over the body a little bit, but not enough to give it up. But I had at the time secretly created a bad tulpa that is actively trying to kill me, and I'm not quite sure why. I never had hurt him or done anything of the sort, but during my low period, I was basically suicidal. What he tries to do is follow my thoughts as they come to try to confuse the brain into yet giving up more power. He often repeats anything that had happened in the brain and echo chambers it. And so when I first met him, he pretended to be younger, at least a younger version of me, angry about me stealing the body and wanted to kill me more than anything, and was close to forcing a switch by pretending that he was taking things from me internally. And as someone who had never dealt with this type of stuff before and didn't know about tulpas at the time, I believed it for a bit. He would say, I heard you say you wanted to die so many times, so I'm going to make it happen. Please die, and stuff like that. On many occasions, he pretended to be a headmate that was manipulative and tried to convince me that I was nothing and could be broken down into nothing. This I had found that was untrue, as questions I had asked did not add up. The only real thing that is true is that this tulpa full-blown wants to kill me and nothing else. He doesn't think about anything other than causing harm of any sort to me and wants nothing but to kill me. He tries anyways, knowing if he succeeded, he would be in a world of hell from everything. Again, I used to be a manipulative daydreamer, so I actively used my imagination for fun, but no violent stuff. But I had never actively tried forcing a tulpa. But he always talks to me nonstop and constantly tries anything. It starts me learning about helping tulpas to try to kill me. All he does is this. I honestly at this point wish I was trolling, but this tulpa is generally trying to kill me off. I tried talking to him and I mentally have gotten in a much better place, yet he still tries. He tries learning anything he can about this. I was in the military and he has in the past actively tried seeking out my memories to learn from that as his goal. He has constantly said this, so I absolutely believe it. So how do I permanently remove this guy? I am seeking professional help as well, so this isn't all out of the way, but he absolutely needs to go. I do not wish to die, and as a host believe I cannot and will not. This guy quite literally wants to replace me and then turn this body into a serial killer because that's the opposite of me. I love justice and things going the way they are supposed to. He actively goes against it. Honestly, I'm ashamed this part even exists at all. I don't even want to say it's a part of me, as this is something I'd never imagined doing. Edit number 1. I know tulpas don't just show up like this for no reason and act this way, but I promise I didn't try making this thing this way. I wasn't even aware I was doing it. I'm also aware that most tulpas are typically great people. Edit number 2. Upon further research, I believe it's possible it's cannabis-induced psychosis, as I smoked daily during this period, to which I promptly stopped collectively. I'm leaving a diagnosis to the professionals, but that's what I think it is from my research and the help of you lovely people. I'm just worried I'll never be able to have a tulpa in the future because of this. I would honestly like one, since all I read about them is that they can be such wonderful people. Then that's it. That's everything that this user comfort account states in their story. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that now. First off, a frightful story, no? When it comes to this, multiple times this user stated that this tulpa was actively trying to kill them. It's kind of scary because this is as they stated, first came on board as a younger version of themselves, and then even then they were trying to steal the body, and they were also trying to force this person, this user, to get more info on how to take over, how to control things, and then at the same time actively stating the person that they should be suicidal and that they would help in any way to try to kill them. I mean, this is almost like the worst case scenario when you can think of all the stories involving tulpas. Really, really scary stuff. Plus, it was interesting too that they stated that they weren't even trying to create a tulpa. They weren't even aware about it. And then all of a sudden it was there. This goes against, though, other things that I was reading in some of my past videos and on the podcast that I was listening to earlier that says you have to be focused on this for hundreds of hours, no? It stated somewhere along the lines of 300 to like 500 hours of just pure 100% focus on creating a tulpa. It doesn't just happen by accident. And yet that's what seemed to have occurred to this user here. So if anybody has more info on that, let me know. Because if there truly is situations where it can happen just randomly out of the blue, that'd be interesting stuff to at least comment on. Now, one of the other people that were commenting on this post stated that it could just be more on the lines of schizophrenia. And I mentioned that before in one of my past videos as well, when I first started talking about tulpas, the idea that this is truly just a misdiagnosis. And this user apparently posted some comments on that as well, too. So who knows if this is just something else other than that, or maybe if it truly is a tulpa run amok as well. But still, just scary stuff because of this bad place, this thing that apparently came on board, and in the way that it just still trying to do so. It again reminds me of the story that I was hearing early on the podcast about another tulpa that just went horribly wrong. And luckily in that story, the tulpa wasn't fully created. And so when the user stopped thinking about it, like stopped building it, quote unquote, then that's when that tulpa slowly went away. But for a while there, it was following this person, this user, just as is, without the user having any control over it. Scary stuff. But if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, then please post those comments below. I always love hearing entries too from people who state they have their own tulpas. Maybe you have some more insight onto this. That'd be really interesting to hear too. That's a world I'm fascinated by it, but I want no participation in it at all. Like when it comes to trying to create something, mess around with it and so on, that's just no thank you on my end. I consider that along the lines of Ouija board stuff, where it's once you open that door, it's forever open. So not in my case, but I always love reading that stuff about other people's encounters too. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye. Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. Well, once again, continuing the theme that everyone seems to like with regards to long stories, long entries, I thought I would create one here, mainly because it has to do with yet another encounter with a tulpa. Lots of people seem to like this particular subject too. So this is great stuff. I was reading this information. It's yet another way to almost accidentally create a tulpa because, at least based on what the user stated, more on that here in just a moment, it seemed like it just happened out of the blue. Makes me wonder, in fact, if it truly takes hundreds and hundreds of hours to create a tulpa, or if it's something just out of the blue, something that's always there hidden in the background. It just happens to come forward at the right moment. But in this case, it's from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit called Tulpas. The user is called Pimpernel, and they stated theirs as yet another is this thought from a tulpa thread. So let's go ahead and let's share that information here, and then I'll get my own thoughts and opinions afterwards. So get ready for a long story here. Here's what they stated. Looks like you get a fair amount of these, so apologies for any annoyance. Wall of text incoming because this has basically been 15 years in the making. I've broken this post up with images for your sanity, and behold, the story of my Biff, best imaginary friend forever, spirituality and psychology entanglement ahead. I've only ever had a casual understanding of tulpamancy over the past decade, and it usually amounted to creepy pastas about tulpas trying to destroy their creator. Suffice it to say, the idea of manifesting a sentient presence that could turn on me one day, even if this isn't the path tulpas take, never really appealed to me. Whatever it is I've done here, I've done by chance and a whole lot of, after all, why not type energy. I've always gone ahead through phases involving fictional characters. I'd fantasize about them, what it would be like to know them, what screwy circumstances would bring us together, how I might befriend them, maybe more, as malapative daydreamers do. I've had a decades-long attachment to one fictional character, and this hit in my formative years, and I'm certain it's going nowhere. There were certain scenarios I'd worked through over and over again in my head ever since I was a teenager, and the overall plot and flow would evolve as I got older, but it was always with this one character. I thought that would be the extent of it for a long time. I knew even a decade ago that creating a tulpa after a fictional character is not encouraged due to the fickleness of preference, personal egos, expectations, etc., but I never intended to create a tulpa. However, after I graduated college 7 years ago, life got pretty bad for me. My family wasn't doing well. I had burned out on my passion. And though I had friends and a boyfriend, now husband, they were all long distance. Of course, depression and anxiety were also along for the ride, but so was something else. One night, the emotional pain was especially difficult to bear, and then out of nowhere, I heard a small, comforting voice in the back of my head. Whoever it was, whatever it was there for me and assured me I wasn't alone. This wasn't a thought I was expecting to have. This wasn't a thought I was expecting would actually comfort me, but I felt comforted. And so I didn't jump on this immediately and say, oh, it's my guy. It was more of a head scratcher. I started an on and off study of various occult practices, astrology, tarot, some pendulum stuff to look for answers, since I wasn't hearing any other voices or exhibiting signs of schizophrenia. Confirmation bias or otherwise, though, signs seemed to indicate that this was a spiritual guide using this character as a form for my benefit, if not some embodiment of the character itself. Since I know the character to be fictional, I leaned on the former. And so that's when I started asking for them. It didn't take long before I could call their name in my mind, and they'd respond with mine as acknowledgement. Over time, I began to imagine the character being physically around me. Usually when I was traveling, exercising, or feeling alone, occasionally I would feel like they would be present, and it was so strong I all but expected them to be there when I opened the door or turned the corner. I also focused on our storyline more. This was different than when I was younger, though. I used to only have a couple of scenes that I would play with. Now they flew in by the dozen. Sometimes the scenes basically composed themselves, and my sense of the character's voice became innate. When I took up medication more seriously and focused further on divination, I refer to this time as when I decided to take the crazy pill. This became a bit more enhanced. As I've used a certain aspect of this as spiritual, I began to look to them for positivity. I had lost my ability to use positive self-talk and felt like I was kidding myself. But if a guide could encourage me, I could believe it. And so I began to feel more support, like the first time I heard that voice, but was still wary of the encouragement I received. I also saw and continue to see synchronicities that relate to our exchanges. I use them to help me ground myself for divination. Occasionally, they'll guide me on picking cards, and the results can be mind-blowing. Could be confirmation bias, though. I am one of the most skeptical woo people you will ever meet. One last year or so, though, I've been able to feel it. Answers to my concerns became faster, and I didn't feel like actively they came from me. I finally started writing our old scenes down, and I also began writing our dialogues in which I bring up some of the worst fears and insecurities to them. I found the responses from them to be very cathartic, and have taken them to heart more easily than advice from my own family. The other development is that occasionally now I'll see flashes of them, not in my direct creation, but instead holding my hand, looking at me kindly, hugging me, etc., but never literally in the same place I'm at. The timing of these events also mark the beginning of my Saturn return, which in my astrology chart could ideally mark the death of my self-loathing. I actually feel like it's helped a great deal in that area. Because this is a tragic character who is unhappy with their story, I felt very little resistance to taking liberties with my version of them. After all, why not? Since I don't naturally belong in their story, and my presence could upend a lot of their known traits, and the character is already full of mystery, there is a lot of room for flexibility in how they might behave. Sometimes I like to imagine multiple versions of our story, so certain parts of the backstory simultaneously exist, but also don't. As a result, though they feel right to me, how I know them is from their original form. And odd thing about us is that they've always understood that my real life and husband take precedent over them. They're happy to be there for me as I require, but they don't mind if I don't seek them out either. They don't seek physical dedication either. While sometimes I'll put romantic or sexual fantasies with them in our storylines, it just seems as though they view it as a perk rather than a requirement. They don't want my body for their use, and I don't want them in charge of my body either. The most they want of me is that I start following my dreams and love myself, but it's not like they would punish me if I didn't. They would just be disappointed to see me remain unhappy and conflicted. In conclusion, I don't think I've ever written this in full to anyone before. I have a friend who was skimming the subreddit after I told him a higher level version. He said it sounds like a tulpa, but the lack of strings attached makes me wonder. Still, I can't deny there are similarities between what I've done and the understood tulpa process. The jury is still out on their spiritual guide thing. They appear to me as a guide for meditations because I like how it feels, but that could be where it ends. Sometimes I wonder if my attraction to their tragic nature is me trying to do inner child work and that I've just chosen a very long way to go about it. Generally interested in any thoughts you may have if you're still reading. I'm well aware this could be the most dumb and convoluted thing ever, and I'm open to hearing that too. Above all else, thank you for your time. And then that's it. That's everything that this user, Pimpernel, mentioned in their long entry. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, as you saw or read or heard on this story, it seems like it just happened out of the blue. This was a user that had, according to them, a casual understanding of tulpamancy, but it wasn't anything that they took seriously. They obviously had that fascination with that fictional character. I wish they could have mentioned who it was, because it could be a TV person or it could be a movie character. Who knows? Maybe somebody from books. But either way, though, they just left it out in the blue as to who that was. But as someone that was tragic, and they had a fascination with them, but that's as far as it went. So the idea of maybe spending hundreds of hours to create a tulpa, as some of my other stories have mentioned, it seems like here it again just happened out of the blue. All of a sudden they heard that voice, that hello, that hey, and then that's when they realized it wasn't from them. In other words, they didn't make it themselves. It was absolutely just coming from someplace else. And then on top of that, it got to the point where they were stating that they could almost feel them with them in the same place. Like if they were opening the door, that they would be standing there, or as they said, they could round the corner and there would be that fictional character too. So how does that happen? Someone please mention in the comments below, how can there be these discrepancies? One, spending hundreds of hours to be able to create a tulpa, and then two, it's just happening out of nowhere. It was nice though to read that with this tulpa, this fictional character, they made their presence known, but there weren't those strings or attachments that others have mentioned as well, that it was there mainly to comfort this user, get them through their depression and anxiety, whatever hard time they were doing, make them as a guide, make sure that they could get to a certain place, but again, not force them to, and not have any kind of bad effects afterward if they didn't. They would just be more disappointed, like a friend would, if something like that were to happen. So that was nice to read as far as with this tulpa. Also, it was interesting to read too that they were not going to let this tulpa take over their lives. Like the husband, the family, and other responsibilities would be first, and that they would not have any kind of romantic or sexual fantasies come out from this relationship. And they made it seem like the tulpa didn't care either, that it was going to be more as a perk rather than a requirement. So all in all, it just seems like it's just something there to help and comfort this user, whatever this fictional character was, and then that would be it. And then it seems like it's still ongoing to this day. One last thing too, it was interesting to read that information. This is the first too. Somebody let me know more on that as well. Is it bad to create a tulpa of a fictional character? That's what the user was mentioning here, because apparently if that happens, maybe its expectations are out of the world, like when it comes to what this character does. Someone give me more hints on that too. Like, why is it bad? Like, let's say if you wanted to create a tulpa of Winnie the Pooh, and with Winnie the Pooh and all the physical characteristics, emotional, the way it acts and so on, why would that be bad as opposed to not doing that? So it makes you wonder, like, would Winnie the Pooh just be Winnie the Pooh or be something different? It left it in the open too. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are with regards to this entry. Very unique entry, very detailed. Seems like, again, it's an ongoing Biff, best imaginary friend forever, that this user has. I just wish there was more details on certain items too. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. Oh, and one last thing too. The user posted a picture, which you've been looking at here. This is where this tulpa lives, I guess, in their world, maybe in their fictional world. Someone knows what this is. Maybe that'll give a hint what the fictional character was, because it looks like a very prestigious place. I have no idea what this building is, but I'm sure if it clicks in someone's mind out there that, like, oh, this is the so-and-so building in so-and-so movie, then that would make more sense. But let me know. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye. Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. Thank you so much everyone for your continued suggestions on the aliens and UFO side. Please keep them coming. I'm going to go ahead and do a new set of videos very, very soon. But I wanted to mix this one in here because it has to do, once again, with a subject matter that I touch upon every now and then here on this playlist, mainly when I come across something that I feel merits posting here, especially because it's a subject that I'm still enamored with. It's something that I just find so fascinating that has to do with the idea of tulpas. So I do follow the reddit.com website there, the subreddit called Tulpas. Every now and then there's a story, an encounter that comes about there that I feel I want to share here. And in this case, it has to do with a user that says that their tulpas or their tulpamancy ended up ruining their mental health. I'll explain more here in a minute, but it goes to show the dangers associated with tulpas. I still am up in the air as to whether they truly exist or not. But to err on caution, I still think that there's a lot of risk that's associated with them. You have to be very careful when it comes to that world, and I'll highlight more on that here in a minute. But it's the user that's called Ember Dragon 240, and they titled theirs as Tulpamancy Ruined My Mental Health, and I don't know what to do now. So here's what they say. I made a mistake, a big one, and I don't know if I can fix it. Back in April, I got hyper-fixated on plurality, specifically endogenic systems / tulpas. I already knew about their existence beforehand. I just got very into the topic around this time. So only really knowing about this for a day at 2 a.m., I decided to make a bit of a rash decision. I decided to try and make a tulpa. I already knew a little bit about it. I thought I'd try and research as I went on, and I really did feel like I wanted to do this at the time. Eventually, though, a few days afterwards to a week, I felt like I was probably going a little bit too fast, so I agreed with Enid, my former tulpa, I think, to have her go dormant for a little bit while I tried to figure out what the F I was doing a bit more. Note, she wasn't fully formed or sentient at this time. Eventually, after about a week, maybe, of bringing her back just to send her back down, maybe even longer, I decided to dissipate her for a good while since it just didn't feel right, I guess. Plurality was just feeling wrong. I didn't feel like my own person anymore. Whenever I was doing things, I had to put Enid into consideration, it seemed like, and it was just not working out. I know this would probably be a controversial decision, but it's too late to really do anything about it, I think. And so I think it's important to know that I was not in the best mental state during this time period. I haven't really been for my whole life. I had a diagnosis for generalized anxiety disorder before it was presumably replaced by a level 1 autism spectrum disorder diagnosis when I was 9. My report at the time did say, however, that I seemed to have unspecified anxiety disorder. So make of that if you will. I do, however, hope to try and get re-diagnosed. Anyways, I think I say it was especially bad back then, to be honest. My friend was dealing with severe mental health issues at the time and attempted blank a few weeks before I did this. None of this was a direct reason I created Enid, but I think it is worth mentioning. Now to the problem. Ever since this all happened, even though I think my friend was already making me depressed, or maybe making already underlying depression worse, but I can't say for certain, I feel like it has gotten so much worse since I created Enid. I've heard of people who feel empty after dissipating a tulpa, but I didn't think I'd had her for long enough for it to happen or to be this bad. I made a stupid decision, I know. I should have looked into this better before I blindly hopped in, but yeah, damage had already been done, I think. She wasn't fully sentient either, I'm pretty sure. I don't know what to do. I can't stop thinking about no matter how hard I try, nothing I do fills this hole I feel inside me, let alone for a long time, no form of entertainment, nothing. I don't know. I just think that I just want to know if there was even anything I can do at this point, or is this permanent? I hope to God it isn't. Another note probably worth mentioning. I'm a minor, more specifically a teenager, so I wonder if hormones might also be part of this, to be honest. God, I made such a dumb move. I need to move on, but I have no idea how. F me. Then that's it. That's everything that the user Ember Dragon 240 mentioned in their experience. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. So as you can see, it looks like this user was in a downtrodden state. It was almost like a mental health slash high set of emotions situation where she stated at 2 a.m. she just decided to make, as she described, a rash decision. All of a sudden she made a tulpa. I don't know exactly again how that world works. Like how long does it take? What do you have to do? I don't really want to know either because I don't want to go into that field and accidentally make one. Although I've read that it takes a while. Like it's not going to be suddenly by accident, like tripping over things and then there's a tulpa. The idea I read is that you have to work at it and you have to work at it for a while, like weeks and so on, maybe even months if it's not successful enough. And then boom, there's a tulpa right there. But in this case, it looks like it just happened right overnight. Well, anyways, she was saying that it was going on for a few days and then a few weeks, and then the tulpa was there, but it wasn't fully formed slash sentient, and then she decided to dissipate it. So that seems like it's a little strange too. Again, I highly caution risks when it comes to creating tulpas, because if the idea is that they are truly individual beings, they may not like having to be put away. I mean, would you, like when it comes to that? So in her case, she did that. She brought it back. She sent it back, brought it back, sent it back. And then all of a sudden Enid is away, or so it seems like. But also Enid, which was the name of the user's tulpa, also seems to be doing some things on the back end, like making her depressed is the impression that she got. It's like she almost feels sad and empty, and she didn't realize that that was going to happen afterwards. So now she's in a worse state than was before the actual tulpa was created. It all ties back to what I was mentioning at the beginning as far as being careful on this stuff. I would never try it. I'm never going to do anything involving tulpas, no matter what, not even for a YouTube experiment, nothing. Because to me, the idea that the mind is pretty powerful and it can create something like this, and then you can't put it away, that's no good. That's no bueno at that point. It's like opening a door to like a Ouija board. Like people tell me to do Ouija board stuff here, and I'm like, no, thank you, because you open a door and who knows if you can ever close it afterward too. You don't have that control, and that control is taken from you, and so it's going to be a far different world at that point. And I do not want to have anything like that. Like I do my ghost hunts, but we always do it with trepidation, and we always make sure, damn sure, that the items, the ghosts, the spirits that are there stay there, that there's nothing that can do to follow us or make sure that they can show up anywhere else all of a sudden where we don't want them to be. That's not going to happen. And so something involving the world of tulpas and the idea that you're doing it straight from your home and that they stay there, that's a big no-no for me. But let me know, tulpas as far as the discussion associated with them, creating them, what happened to this user, and then Enid. Does anyone else have any type of similar stories? I'd love to hear about them in the comments. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye. Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. Once again, I'm sharing another strange and creepy encounter here, this one potentially doing with the world of tulpas. Those of you that have followed my channel for a while know how much I enjoy sharing these type of unique experiences because it's something that shouldn't exist, and yet it's there, and it's more commonly associated with the world of imaginary friends. In fact, the title of this encounter is the one that caught my attention. Once again, it comes from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit called True Scary Stories. It's a user by the name of Ash Ketchup, and sure enough, the title of theirs is Imaginary Friends. So let me know what you guys and gals think. Is this yet another strange encounter involving the almost potentially dangerous world of tulpas? Let me know. I'm going to go ahead and I'll post my comments on it afterward as well. In fact, here's what the user says. I figure I'd post another story that just recently came back up in conversation with my friends and I. I might have posted something regarding this thing before in more detail, but I don't remember. If I have, I'll link the post somewhere. If not, I'll have to tell that story another time. For context, when I was little, my family lived in a 2-room apartment with 2 bathrooms, one in the master bedroom and one in the hallway, and then a kitchen and a living room. There was also a balcony that had those long, flexible sliding blinds that hang down vertically from their track. My bedroom was just across from the guest hallway bathroom. My parents' room was at the end of the hallway, and on the other end was the kitchen, which was on the right-hand side facing towards the master bedroom. On the left side, there was a small space for a table, and then behind the table was the sliding balcony door. The living room occupied the rest of that space. The layout of this apartment is important for this part of the story, so please keep it in mind. I spent the first 3 years of my life in that apartment, and during that time, my parents claimed to have witnessed things moving on their own, things that they just put down on the center of tables rolling or sliding off of the flat surfaces, or the vertical blinds falling off of the track without any kind of influence. The most chilling thing from that time that my parents have both told me was that I had an imaginary friend who I'd named Elmo. Elmo was extremely tall, tall enough that his back would be against the wall and all red. According to my dad, I would often talk to myself. When asked who I was talking to, I would reply stating that I was talking to this imaginary friend. When things were put in the wrong places, I'd say Elmo did it. If things fell off the table, Elmo did it. If the TV was left on at night, Elmo did it. Despite these creepy occurrences, nobody really batted an eye until the same year we left that apartment. I remember vivid nightmares, which is a story for another time, and sleep paralysis episodes that I had at a very young age, and a distinct fear of that bathroom across the hall from my room. My little brother would also refuse to use that bathroom alone even in the daytime. Our guess is that he saw something in there, much like I had in my own room at that same age. By the end of that year, my parents had decided it was best for us to move. My father even admitted to having the home blessed before we moved out, which is saying a lot since he's normally not superstitious or a paranormal believer. He holds the same belief I do, where we don't believe in the paranormal unless it shows itself to us. The fact that my father felt the need to have that apartment blessed before we moved out really makes me wonder what was there to influence that decision, but I digress. Now that the major context is out of the way, here's the part that came up recently. I was babysitting my youngest brother at my grandma's house. My dad's a single parent now, and so he often needs breaks from watching my youngest brother to take important meeting calls, so either myself or my grandma will take over that role. At the time, he was either 4 or 5. He's on the autism spectrum, and as a result, especially back then, he had a hard time communicating in full sentences. He still was and is able to get his points across with somewhat fuller sentences, but at the time, he would only say 1 or 2 words at most. This particular day, I was entirely home alone watching him until my grandma got there to take over. Normally, one of my aunts would be there, but this particular day, it was just my brother and I. At some point, he got very upset and began trying to block off the hallway that my grandma's bathroom was in. Her hallway closet and pantry door both open outward, and you can cover the hallway with those doors. At first, I tried to get him away from the doors and move him to the living room, which was closer to the front door so I could investigate. I got my knife from my bag and had him wait in the living room as I went to see what could have scared him. I checked every inch of the bathroom, all 3 bedrooms in that hallway, the closets, the bathroom in the master bedroom, everything. I couldn't figure out what spooked him. Despite not finding anything remotely threatening as I searched, I still just felt really uneasy. That could, of course, be written off as paranoia due to the situation of me, a teenage girl, alone in a house with a boy who's getting scared about something in a dim hallway with 4 rooms and 2 closets, but the feeling was eerie nonetheless. When my grandma got home, I of course asked if my brother had done this before while she was watching him, and to my surprise, she said yes. She told me he'd been getting scared and saying there was a monster in his room at night. Of course, she also brought up how he was the same age my brother and I were when we saw who I suspect was the imaginary friend Elmo, and reminded me that my grandpa, who was a religious leader of sorts in her church, was the one who blessed the apartment before we moved in. Later on, I brought this experience up to my dad, who also agreed the situation was similar to what happened when we lived in that apartment all those years ago. He's also told me that my mom had seen a tall figure as well throughout her life and my childhood. However, we also wrote that off as her being high or something since she was on substances for the majority of the time I've been alive. Either way, I find the whole situation just incredibly unnerving, regardless if it's some kind of spirit or just some hallucination that my whole family seems to be prone to seeing. Whatever the case is, I hope nothing like what happened that night happens when I have to watch my brother overnight this coming Tuesday. Wish me luck. I'll keep you updated if a ghost comes to visit while I'm home alone then. And then that's it. That's everything that the user Ash Ketchup mentioned. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. So here we go again. The world of imaginary friends. So this user, this girl, she was mentioning that when she was younger, she had an encounter, multiple encounters with what she called her imaginary friend. Apparently, it was something that they called Elmo. And on top of that, it was really tall, really thin, completely red. In fact, it was so tall that I got the impression that it had to be against the wall, like meaning it would have to lean against the wall to make sure that it didn't, I guess, hit the ceiling, something along those lines. But sure enough, she was the only one that saw it. And then her parents would ask her, who's she talking to? And then she would say, it's them, it's Elmo. And then she would also mention that Elmo was doing all those other things in terms of knocking things off the table, in terms of moving things to different places, in terms of the TV being left on at night, and so forth. It seemed like it was all A-OK, at least until they decided to leave. It was almost like it was the parents thinking, all right, it's best for them to move on. This is getting too much or out of hand. And so when that happened, that's when she was saying there were vivid nightmares and sleep paralysis episodes. That's really freaky, especially the fact that her other, I believe it was her other family member, refused to go across to the bathroom in a certain area as well. It was her little brother because of apparently what he was seeing there too. So cut to another generation, and in this case, she is babysitting, or cut to a little bit to the future, and she's babysitting her youngest brother, this time at her grandma's house. He is now 4 or 5, and then he in turn has seen something there at the grandma's place. So now we have a situation where you have this thing, whatever it is, a tulpa maybe, it has latched on to the user, and then it in turn has moved on to the younger brother and is continuing to make its presence known. In fact, at a different location, in this case, the grandma's house, and it's apparently there, like it's in the same type of area, like maybe a bathroom area or something like that. It seems to like either bedrooms or it seems to like bathrooms, and then that's it. And on top of that, the grandma is aware of it as well, knowing that it's been happening. And then also, it looks like the grandfather was aware of it as well, so much so that he was blessing the apartment, which is another spooky thing. Imagine that. They were blessing the apartment before they moved in, and they still had those encounters. And then they blessed the apartment afterward, and they still have those encounters. So this definitely seems to be something that is there and it's stuck. It's just there and it hasn't left, and who knows how long it'll stay afterward. In fact, she left it on a cliff note of sorts, asking to wish her luck because apparently she's going to be staying there overnight and she doesn't want this encounter to happen again. Overall, pretty creepy situation. Can you imagine that? Having this type of tulpa or whatever it is just constantly there. You never know when it's going to make its appearance, but it's there and it's going to do so sometime soon. And so you're going to have that constant looking over your shoulder thing. That is not a good way to live. But otherwise, let me know what you guys and gals think. Is this imaginary friend another tulpa? Is this something involving ghost spirits? Something else entirely different? If you have similar encounters, let me know as well. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.